Today, my guest is Carolyn Berry with Alzheimer's Arkansas. She's the education director of education. And we talked a couple of weeks back, and we decided that we were going to do this once a month.
We did.
Because first of all, I just like your friendship. And then secondly is because you have such great information, and I just want to create a consistency. So we have us, for our video portion, a lovely fire.
Because it's cold, too.
Finally.
It's beautiful, and it's cold, finally.
And afterwards, we're going to have some hot chocolate and visit with Mother. So, as you all know, anything could happen. You know, I think I see a little sleet.
So, when I was on my way over, I saw sleet. Me and my son was having a discussion. He's on his way to work. He's 17. And he was like, I think it's sleet. Should I go to work? I was like, you work at a grocery store. You have to go to work.
Yeah, and everyone's running there now. So we have, I'm just double checking everything. It looks like I've got audio going, and it's always such an issue for me getting everything hooked up. So we're going to try this every month, probably the end segment of each month, towards the end of each month. But today we talked that we want to talk about the importance of routine.
Yes.
And so you're going to kick us off with how you communicate that to people who call you and at these seminars that you attend often. And then I will give some personal application of how I realize how important routine is.
So the most important thing about routine, and I think for caregivers, is not only is it important to your loved one or the person you're taking care of, but it's important to you too. And you don't recognize it until after you have a mishap, right? Or when you don't really recognize why all of the, I don't like to call them behaviors, I like to call them responses, like people's response, because when somebody has Alzheimer's and dementia, it's usually a response to something. So, you know, clinically, a lot of people call them behaviors, but it's really more like a response to what's going on in the environment or to someone else, usually. So behavior makes it seems like a child and like they're doing something bad. It's just, personally, I don't really like behaviors. So routine is important, number one, with Alzheimer's, dementia patient, and we will use these interchangeably just in case people ask, because they need to be familiar with people, the routine, the things that's happening as they are losing sense of the environment. And I would imagine most caregivers would recognize, and I've heard some people say that maybe they don't even recognize their loved one anymore, but they're familiar with them.
Interesting. Yeah, I think about that often.
Yeah.
Right now my mother recognizes me, but I know my speech and my presence, one day if she doesn't know who I am, will be familiar. So that's a good point.
Yeah. So familiar. And if we think about ourselves, our environments, we function better in things that feel familiar to us. So having a routine keeps their biological clock, especially if they still have familiar, keep people, if you try to keep the same caregiver, if you're getting help, familiar. So it cuts back on agitation, aggression, them being tired. And I often use, parallel them with people with Alzheimer's and dementia with toddlers with no respect because they're not children. However, you can parallel, because if you think about how a toddler gets off routine, how their world gets out of whack, and it causes more havoc for us and them. So it's kind of the same parallels.
Yeah, now that makes sense. And while you were talking, I thought about, we do occasionally these day trips once a week, and we are usually with the same people, Jim and Linda Tater. And so Mom doesn't know them by name, and she's not going to understand exactly where she knows them from, but when they arrive, they are familiar. Yeah.
Yes.
And so she might be a little anxious because we're going somewhere. She's in a good spirits, and she keeps asking, now who's coming? And then once she sees them, she'll give them a hug because they're familiar.
Yes. So there is an innate part of us, since we've been babies and toddlers, that we recognize when things are familiar to us. So when you think about the routine and you parallel or compare it to a toddler, you think about why we have consistent bedtimes, nap times, eating times, because their body and their responses to the environment function better, right? So, we usually get them up at a certain time. They have breakfast at a certain time. And a lot of times they eat what's familiar. We don't give them like different foods. When we do, we don't know if it's going to upset their stomach, how they're going to...
Yeah.
Because everything's changing when you have dementia. So then we put them to nap time at the same time. Because if their nap time is off, if you put them to bed too early, they're not going to function better at the end of the day. If you put them too late, they're not going to be able to go to bed. So all of these routines are very familiar, a lot of us, with children. So, and we can see how they cause like just responses to the environment and how tired we are, or maybe we put them down too early and they're not tired. Did they get the exercise they need? So just sometimes the smallest things can throw off the routine, which throws their body, like their clock,
right,
off.
Yeah. All right. So we have a pretty regular familiar. Since I don't work anymore, I don't have to get up to do something except deal with my routine if she's still asleep, and that's the cats.
Yeah.
The litter box, get the coffee started, turn off the home alarm, just a little bit like that. She will eventually get up. Now, she usually gets up before I do. It just depends, because I usually stay up a little bit later and do my Bible study stuff. So mornings are not an issue. She always wakes up in such good spirits and excited to see the cats and excited to see me. And it was a couple of weeks ago an evening routine. So I go to bed early. Now, I just said that I don't.
Yeah, but you just...
But I can't go to sleep right away. But I know I'm tired. I don't want to watch TV. But I usually, once she goes into bed, I will then start my studies, which are online, until I get really sleepy. So now if hormonally I'm all over the map, it could be hours before I actually, but that's usually my time without any distractions. So I always my body starts getting sleepy around 8.
Okay.
And Mom's does too, but what I've realized is that I've got to let her make the decision. So the other night, I was just wiped out, and I knew I could probably go off to bed. And so she got up to go to the bathroom, and then I walked in there and said, "It's bedtime." She goes, "What?" And it wasn't the time, it was the manner in which I
expressed it.
Yeah, and the way it didn't happen, because normally for her, there is a routine where we have the discussion in my bedroom while we're watching TV. "Is it bedtime?" She'll ask. "Yeah, okay, that's fine." And then she'll go into her room, and then I'll go and meet her there, and we do our little evening routine. But this time I walked in, because I didn't say we were going to bed, but I decided once I got up, it was bedtime. And I walked in there, and I said, "Well, good night." She goes, "What?" So just that small moment changing it really threw her off. So I thought, oh, she seems a little unsettled. So I kissed her and told her good night. And then I went into my room, and then later on she goes, opened the door, and she goes, "Are you mad at me?" And I went, "No, why?" She goes, "Because of the way you went to bed." So I just realized I have to be extra patient at night. And even if I know that by 8:30 she's tired, and she's not watching TV, if I let her go, "Well, I'm going to go to bed now." Okay, me too, I'm tired. Then I get up, follow her to her room. So I just have to be extra patient. But it was amazing to me how quickly that changed. Just that small routine threw her off, and she thought I was mad at her.
So 2 things there that I hear in the story. The routine, because to her, familiar is, so like a lot of times we have bed routines and we do it with our children. So if the routine is not the same, what are you communicating? Right? So we're not talking about an outing. We're not talking about a doctor's appointments, because, we can't always keep the routine because life happens. But more than that, it comes, so this is about to go, just like caregiving, into a whole nother topic, and it's her emotional intelligence. So we keep our emotional intelligence a long time. And from my perspective, when we kind of lose something, other things become heightened. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So she's reading more because of her emotional, because we keep that for a long time.
Yeah, okay.
So really, with her saying, "Are you mad?" think about how we respond, even with friends. If I do something different than we usually do, hang the phone up differently, then you like, is something going on with her?
Yeah, if the text is
shorter, or
like your phone was broken and I didn't know it, and yesterday you didn't respond to my text about the podcast, and then this morning I sent you another text and I was worried.
Yeah.
Because I was like, that's not like her. So I called the office and they said that you were at a program and that your phone was broken. So I was like, okay, I feel better. I didn't think it had anything to do with me.
Yes.
But it worried me as your friend.
Yeah. So a lot of times the way we communicate, when it changes, we have to recognize with Alzheimer's and dementia patients, like, they don't lose their intelligence.
Okay.
And I know you can see that. Like, they may be losing some other functions, but our intelligence, what we have, we think about toddlers. I know we've all seen like these crafty, intelligent toddlers, right? And you're like, oh, they're so intelligent. We don't lose our intelligence. We may lose some facts and some knowledge, but our intelligence lasts a long time, and especially emotional. So I could see where she seen that routine change, and even the way you usually suggest that she goes to bed. Yeah. Tonight you're like, it's bedtime. It's kind of like if she was a kid, really, and you like, oh, it's bedtime.
Yeah, that is so funny, because there is one other way that she does it. If she's getting tired, she'll go, "Now you just let me know when you want me to go to my room and go to bed. When you need to go to bed." And I'm like, okay. And I'm like, I'm fine. I want to finish watching this show. We watch documentaries at night. And she'll, okay, I just want to, she's being very mindful and very considerate.
Yes.
But it's her decision. She made a point to say that. And so I usually take that as a cue that she's tired. Then probably I'll wait about 10 minutes or so, because it's usually between the 8 and 8:30 mark. I'll go, I'm so tired. It's bedtime. Okay.
Yes.
So it's just these small little, so it's a good point, not emotional intelligence. And of course, I had to, the other night, nothing, it was just a weird backwards kind of routine at the beginning. And that the fact that she was so upset, she thought I was mad at her, and she came down the hall when I assured her I wasn't. She goes, okay, well, I was just worried you were mad at me. So I gave her another hug, and she went off to bed. It's very interesting.
Yes. So not only was it the change in routine, because she's usually in your room.
Yeah.
Think about that. So it's really an intimate evening. You guys have an intimate evening routine. So she's usually, you're together watching TV or together. But that night you went to sleep, got up, right?
No, that night, the difference in that night is she gets off often to go to the potty, but we had not discussed bedtime.
Yeah.
When she was in her bathroom, I said, well, good night, and it totally threw her.
Yeah.
Because nothing was discussed
Yes.
in my room. So that was the difference. It's just the decision. I made the decision once she went up to go to the potty.
Yeah.
So there was no verbal discussion about bedtime prior to that, and that really threw her off. So it was so I have to be very careful. And that, look, I'm retired now. I don't have the pressure of getting up and doing something. So it just made me realize, you can hang out longer. Like, you've watched the football game the other night with her till 10 o'clock. So you can function. You're not going to die if you are not going to bed by 8:30 to then lay awake for an hour and a half. So let it be her decision, because I have the rest of the evening if I'm not too tired to go ahead and do my studies. Now, I do my studies during the day too, but there's certain podcasts I listen to at night, so I need no cat, and no mom, and no TV.
Yeah, and it makes sense, but like routines for her important because it gives her the safety and familiar feeling. And even so, we think about the response, so even emotionally it gives her safety.
Yeah.
Right? Because there's an emotional component to your evenings. So when you're like in a different space and it kind of seems like you're sending her to bed.
Yeah, that's what she felt. Like, because she was like, oh, okay. Like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting because it is a very comforting night for her when we're curled up with the cats and propped up, and she's working her solitaire on the computer, and I'm working mine or listening to a Bible study or a book or something, and the cats are there, so it's very comfortable for her. And going to bed is not uncomfortable for her, but I can tell there is a decision all of a sudden, because we spend so much time during the day together, that now we're going to be separate. Like the other night, she goes, I think I'm going to start sleeping in that room right next to you. And I'm like, okay, Mom, knowing that she's not. I'm like, well, that's fine, but you're not going to have your bathroom right there. And, I'm just down the hall. You shouldn't be afraid, and if you don't shut your door, the cats will get in there. Oh, if I throw that in there. Oh, yeah, the cats. All right, well, good night. But it could happen. I realize there could be a change where she cannot go to that bedroom and sleep by herself, and that's fine. I'll go with her. Anything to keep her comfortable. But that has transpired. That's been a couple of conversations lately where she's a little more restless than normal, and the room seems far away when it's, just 10 feet from. So as she's progressing, like those kind of measurements, which we don't really pay attention to, becomes it is far away to her. You're not as close. We lose perception, right? We lose a lot of perceptions. So even the perception that you're further away than you actually are becomes part of. And it's a routine too, because you feel close. Yeah, and during the day, we're right there watching TV. We don't watch TV in the den anymore. It's in my comfortable retractable bed. So we get real comfortable. We got all of our pillows. She's got her side of the bed, and her computer's over there, and if she wants to grab it. But more than that the cats are with us. So they'll jump up and down on that bed. So we're all together. She's got the window, but she loves to touch me. So occasionally she has to touch me, and I've noticed that really she's been doing
You
that
know,
for
we
the
can do
last
this
couple
for
of-
a long time, right?
Huh?
So,
Yeah.
I mean, we could talk about everything a long time. So, I like to talk about physical touch. It's an important part of human nature. And, you know, babies need it to develop, and we need it. And the older we get, we stop having physical touch. And it's an important part of just who we are as humans. It's very, very important. So if you kind of think about it, when you think, here we go back to toddlers and little kids. So when you see some little kids, and they don't even have to be friends, but when they like each other and they run up and see, like, they're hugging each other and holding hands and happy, that touch is so important. Then we get older, right? And, you know, when you think about it, when's the last time you've had physical touch? And like a lot of caregivers or families, not physical touch that's a task, but just a physical touch to like hold your hand or hug. Like, we lose a lot of physical touch the older we get. You become sicker, and people do tasks, like help you do things, but you stop receiving hugs, and you stop. It's just, and think about COVID, we've become distant, right? So we lose physical touch, and that's an important part of who we are, and we miss it. So it's important to know that you're there, and when you touch, you're familiar. So when she touches you, there's a different sensation we get when we touch people.
Yeah. And in our routine every morning, I don't care if my head's stopped up, if I don't feel well, or if I'm just a little groggy, is a big hug in the morning. Big hug, and I love you. And then, of course, as you well know, we have our prayer time in the morning once we get our coffee. So we've always been very huggy. I just thought that aspect has been very interesting, is because
emotional intelligence. So she needs to know you're there and feel you.
Yeah. And she'll go, I have to go to the potty. And before she goes, she sometimes kisses my shoulder or just does that. I'm like, okay. She'll go, I'll be right back. And now sometimes she likes to use her nails. She thinks it's funny. Not hurting-wise, but it's like chalkboard. It's like, I don't like that. And I have to be so patient because she thinks it's funny. And again, she's not hurting me. It's just I don't like that feeling of nails on my skin. And I would rather her pat me, and most of the time she does. But, yeah. And another thing she does that drives me crazy, but I just have to deal with it, is that when she walks by, because she has to walk right past my feet, she likes to grab my toe. Yeah, so I'm like, ugh, because she'll either tickle me, which when we were little kids, she would tickle my brother and I all the time by our feet, and it would drive us crazy. But so I just have to be cool with it.
So you think about the needs, our first needs, you know, with kids. We're playful, but we touch kids a lot, right? We hug them and we grab them, and like you're saying, tickle and grab toes and noses, and there's a lot of touch involved, and it's a lot of communication. Like, I love you, adore you, I'm happy to be around you. Those type of things. Even, like, I like you enough that I tease you, like, with her fingernails, right?
Yes,
like,
that's a good one. She likes to tease.
So it's like a part of playfulness, right? So those are the innate things that stay with us, and you'll see more in a lot of people that have dementia or Alzheimer's, because they are kind of going backwards. And when you say kind of backwards, it's more like those things that are innate, the emotional, intelligent things. That's how we communicate. That's her communication,
right?
More now than probably even words.
Well, and a part of that other routine, and I know you and I've talked about it before, is I try not to schedule early morning, because the morning routine for her sets the day. So if I schedule an early morning doctor's appointment, it really throws her off. So, and then any doctor appointment I have scheduled, I try not to do it real early in the morning. And I have that liberty to do that, the freedom to do that, since I'm not working full time. So that, and then I just thought of, again, I was just thinking about familiarity just with my friends Jim and Linda. You know, they've been our traveling companions now for a couple years. And so it really does, it gives me such satisfaction, because even though she may not engage as much if we're stopped for lunch or something like that, I can see she's comfortable with them. And that makes me feel good. So it's also, now you've known, now she's not going to remember you, but the minute I showed her the paintings that we did at the Alzheimer's Arkansas event, and then I said, "Oh, Mom, you've met her several times." Without a doubt, when she saw your face, it was, as you said, familiar.
Yes.
And so I think that's so key, because there's a lot of people that come over here to do the podcast, and she's never met them. But because they're with me and they're in the home, oh yeah, I remember you, and it may be the first time, and I just let it go. But because the home is safe, I'm safe. I'm not asking her to do anything. She's not feeling threatened or awkward or something like that. So she's cool. But I just like it that everyone she meets, it's like, "Oh yeah, hi again." You know, she'll say hi, and it's like for the first time she's ever met them. But
that's a familiar thing with you too, which you probably don't recognize, is when people are with you. That's familiar, that maybe she doesn't really, but she trusts you.
Right.
So it is like like she's familiar with, I wouldn't say strangers, but she knows you bring people in. Like, even though people may be like, "Oh, you're bringing different people in," but they have familiar spirits, and you are introducing them, right? And it's familiar for you to bring people in, do a podcast, so that's not strange to her. But like if you had, you didn't do it often, it may upset her routine a little bit, but that is a part of your life, if that makes sense.
Oh, yeah.
And you're introducing, so she trusts you, and she probably can feel more than we recognize, like animals and babies, like they feel when people aren't, like you get uneasy, right? So you bring them.
Yeah, my friend Jackie, she's more familiar with her now, and she's one of the ones that came and stayed with Mom for about 4 hours while I went to that event. When I used her to come and sit with Mom through that grant that I got through the Alzheimer's Arkansas, and she's done a couple podcasts, but she came over to play cards. And at first, Mom was like, I could tell she was unsure, not of Jackie, but whether or not she could, and not that she couldn't play the card game, but she just, that wasn't familiar to her, because normally we sit and eat, and then Mom goes to the room. So I said, "Mama, do you want to play spades with us?" And so once we got into it, she was just picking on Jackie. Jackie was laughing. It was like they'd known each other for years, so she really got into it. But it was different at first, because we don't usually have people over to play games with us, but I want to start trying that. And so she just had to warm up to it. But I knew eventually I could get her in there. So Jackie and I visited for a while. We were working on some stuff, and then I go, "Hey, Mom, Jackie wants to play cards. You want to play cards?" "Yeah." You know, and then she sat down, and then because she used to play spades all the time, it comes back to her pretty fast. Yes. And then, but the fact that they were laughing and giggling and acting up just was like warmed my heart.
So she's more familiar with people probably coming in to do podcasts. She can adjust to that better than she did like the card game a little bit.
Right.
So you can see how familiar things that we don't think about, she just recognized like familiar things you do around the house.
Right. And so Jackie's going to try to come once a month to play cards. And Jackie would be one of those that I could call up and feel comfortable because she took care of her mom, her mother-in-law, my apologies, who had Alzheimer's. So it's not an unfamiliar thing for her, and she's not uncomfortable with it, but it would make me, the more I can get Mom used to seeing her.
See, you already know, the more familiar she's with Jackie. Because she'll never probably remember her, but she feels familiar to her.
Yeah, I think that's so fascinating, isn't it?
It is.
So again, folks, we are talking about routine and even the smallest little bump in the road. And I didn't beat myself up. It was a learning curve. I was like, whoa. And it was. And you're right. It was an emotional response. The bedroom wasn't unfamiliar. I wasn't unfamiliar. It was, we didn't go through the proper routine of bedtime. And so she just quickly associated that with the fact that I must be upset with her.
Something's wrong.
Yeah. So I can handle, I can handle that. I can handle going ahead and going, all right, we have all the time in the world during the day. It's not as if I can't do my studies because she likes to listen to them. So it's not as if I'm trying to get alone time. It's just that my body starts getting really sleepy and my mind gets sleepy. So I just don't even want to focus on TV, and that's what we're doing together, even if it's a documentary or something. We try to find some adventure. Now, obviously, she is not going to know she asked me a bazillion questions, but if it's somebody climbing Mount Everest or if it's action-packed documentary of someone like that, she can follow along, but she's not really.
Yeah. I mean, it makes sense. But something that your listeners could take from this is a small change in your routine caused a response emotionally for her to think that something was wrong. You're mad. So if you think about a big change in the routine, how much bigger her response could be, and does she get agitated? So if you kind of think about how a different routine, and maybe caregivers here like that they've seen where their loved one has become very agitated, very upset. Think about how probably big that routine change was.
Right.
Like missing the nap or not being able to sleep at their home. So they're frustrated, so lack of words causes responses.
Right.
Or the inability to communicate like how they feel comes responses.
Right. Wow. It's tricky.
So it's kind of like a good example for your part is it was small.
Yes.
And you noticed a small, are you mad at me? So if you kind of think of a bigger change, a response that may come out bigger, like an agitation, aggression with your loved one, because of the bigger the change, the bigger the emotional response.
Oh, girl. And let me tell you, I've seen that big emotional response all my life. But, yeah, no, I can see that. And the last thing I want to do is aggravate her more. But it was so quickly dealt with because I could get up, hug her, oh, no, and then all was fine. And, again, it is a lot in how I responded.
Yes.
If I was being immature about it, I could have gotten like, oh, come on, Mom, and I'm not obviously going to do that. But in the beginning of Alzheimer's,
but even if you say, why did you say that, which would lead to more, like you said, your emotional intelligence, how you respond may become how small it stays or how large it may become. Because, you could have said, yes, it's bedtime, and you went to bed. not giving her a hug, reassuring her, and then she goes to her room and she maybe, sometimes with Alzheimer's and dementia, we feel like they don't remember, but they remember how they feel.
Right, apparently, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, because even though, like, she's not going to remember, like, we'll come home, like, we just recently went and saw the trumpeter swans. It was a beautiful day. She liked the company, but once we got home, she wasn't quite sure where we were. But she knows that it was pleasurable. And then I bring pictures up. She's like, oh, yeah. So the important thing is that she knows that nothing dramatic happened. She was safe. We weren't gone overnight, though she still sometimes thinks that we're like, did we spend the night somewhere? It's just like a 4-hour trip.
Yeah.
It feels like 8 hours. I just find that so fascinating. But, all right, so good. So, folks, we are going to keep on each month and just tackle a topic. And I hope that you've gained some insight from this conversation about the importance of routine. And again, we always want to make sure if you mess up, like I did the other night, that was really a learning curve for me. Don't beat yourself up.
Don't.
Because you're going to have moments where you're not feeling good or you just didn't think things through and that when I saw the problem, I dealt with it accordingly, with kindness and warmth and her feeling safe. But routine, from doctor's appointments to etc., is really crucial. And some things are not going to be able to be helped. Like I think sometimes, oh, Miss Whiskers, that's our big older cat. Please don't die. Because now that's a routine that's going to really throw her off. But we can't help those. Those are life things that will happen. But she's so used to seeing Miss Whiskers, and Miss Whiskers gets on top of her. And every night when Mama goes to bed, she's got to ask me a zillion times. And I'm more patient now about it because I used to be like, yes, they're inside. She wants to make sure the cats are inside. So I know she's going to ask like about 5 or 7 times before she can actually settle in bed. And I just answer patiently and lovingly. Yes, like I'd never answered it before. And so the cats are always one of my concerns. Cats, stay healthy, stay safe. Mama needs you.
Yeah. And you need them.
Yeah, they're so sweet. They give her such joy. And, well, Carolyn, thank you. I've been looking outside periodically because I don't think we're worried about anything freezing, but I did see where some sleet had hit the deck. So I think you're safe, but I don't want the sun to go down and then all of a sudden the roads become sketchy before I send you on your way. And plus we have to have our hot chocolate.
We have to have hot chocolate.
So folks, expect to hear from Carolyn once a month for sure. She's such a sweetheart. She's so gifted in this area. And I love you very much.
I love you too. Thank you for having me. Thank you.